My name is Allyn Klisheimer. Um, on September 11, 2001, I was in a meeting around the corner from this building, downtown Washington, and I received a cell phone call from my office to tell me that a plane had hit a building in New York, and I had received a call from New York to go to New York to assist. I'm a structural engineer, and um, I've done lots of new buildings, but in addition to that, do lots of analysis of failures. I went back to my office 10:30 when I'm getting ready to leave. Got a phone call from the Pentagon that asked me for a plane to hit the Pentagon that asked me to come to the Pentagon. I looked at some views on the television of New York and decided that it was clear to me from my experience that the buildings in New York were going to collapse, and I couldn't do anything about it, and I would go try to assist at the Pentagon to the best that I could, since that's my backyard. I live in Washington, D.C. Today's date is October 24th, 2002, and I've been asked to kind of reflect on what went on. I got to the Pentagon at approximately 1:30 or so in the afternoon, and it took me 2 hours to get from where I found a place to leave my car to the crash site. My hair usually is very disarrayed, my beard is sticking way out, and I look like a terrorist, so I was accosted many times by security people, but finally got to the site probably at 3 o'clock or 3:30 in the afternoon, and the Pentagon people, the Lee Evey, who was the program manager for PENRAN, which works under the Department of Defense, who did not know me and had called me based on some recommendations of somebody that did know me, that I was to do whatever I could to assist the emergency workers, the first responders, and to just do whatever I could. So the first 24 hours, I think I stayed there for 48 or 72 hours straight. First 24 hours or so, my job was to assist the FEMA people and the fire and rescue people, to help them understand where I felt places were safe and not, to go places that I thought were not safe, to make sure what I thought could be done to make it safe. After about the second day of that, I was asked to work with the FBI, the SEALs, and the Special Forces, to help them go to areas to A, search the crime scene, and B, go to areas where there's secure items that needed to be recovered in a secure way. What I did at that time was I reconnaissance the building myself, and there were places I wouldn't allow those three groups to go. I would go in where I wouldn't let them go to get what they were trying to get, and found some incredibly heroic people who were just following me blindly wherever I told them they could or couldn't go. And around the fourth day, I was asked to take charge of everything in regards to securing the balance of the building, to assist the FBI further, and to determine which part of the building had to be torn down, what we could do to build something back, and to essentially take charge of the design of the entire project. By then, I'd gotten some folks from my office involved and had one or two of them at the site. I advised the Penman people that I didn't want to have all those people working for me because I didn't want to be responsible to pay them. So the agreement was on Sunday. I was given a contract to be responsible for all those things, as well as being an owner's rep. I would pick the team I wanted, but they would work directly for Penran. Within a week after we continued to try to search for survivors, and when there's disasters like this, having done this before in Oklahoma City and the first World Trade Center collapse and lots of other hurricanes and earthquakes and man-made collapses, you're searching very hard to try and find someone alive. We tried to trace cell phones with special devices. We found lots of cell phones, but they were all having people called in where people were trying to find whoever they were calling, and we found nobody alive, although in the back of the building I thought I heard something, and by the time we got up there it was just another dead body. In the first night, fireman gave me his uniform, and I went in with the general, and we're walking around. There's still flames here and there and hot water dripping down, and obviously everything is all collapsed. And we reached a point where I was standing there, and to my right were two burned skeletons. All you saw was skulls and ribs. And to my left at my feet were two guys who apparently when you begin to burn before you actually burn, your skin gets plastic. And they were looking up at me, and their eyes were open. They had a little blood in their mouth, obviously from a fractured skull. And the general said something that he wished we could do something with these people. And I said, yeah, me too. And then I said, well, I'll tell you what we can do. We can get this place rolling again. And he said, how long would it take? And I said, we can do it in a year. That came back to haunt me because it was probably a 4-year job, and no one thought it was possible. They decided I was even crazier than they knew me to be, and that it wasn't possible. Long story short, we began doing lots of testing while we were waiting. We had to only secure the building. We were trying not to tear anything down until October 11th because there was going to be a ceremony, commemorative ceremony on the other side of the building. And the idea was to keep the building looking essentially as it did when the plane hit, to the extent that was possible. So we actually started construction work on October 18th. That gave us time to begin doing drawings and studies, deciding what we wanted to do. And we began demolition with two wonderful demolition people working for Potts and Callahan, who essentially had never done anything like that, but just did what we asked them to do. And they set the pace. Their 8-month construction activity or demolition activity actually took them less than 30 days by working 2 12-hour shifts apiece, 7 days a week. That set the pace for the next group. When I was there, I was asked to try and use as many of the contractors that were already on site, and they were there having done a remodeling in Wedge 1, which is basically an interior remodeling with some hardening of the building. And so we tried to use as many of those contractors as we could, supplementing it where we needed to. AMEC was the general contractor on the job, and we interfaced with them and brought in other subcontractors where we decided it was appropriate. When I was hired, the rules of my contract that I set up were A, there were no rules but my rules. B, I would not deal with anybody with a white shirt or a tie except for Lee Evey himself. And the last rule was there'd be no rules but my rules. And the government absolutely adhered to that. I had briefings every morning at 8 o'clock with the services. We had construction meetings at 4:30 in the morning, and then at 6:30 and 7. And all I did is explain what we were doing. Nobody questioned me. The Corps of Engineers and other folks weren't really involved, although they were trying to be involved, and the decisions that we made were based on our experience and my 43 years of having done buildings. Sometime in December, we could see that these people were beginning to see that we possibly might be able to pull off what I had promised. And we had, again, at that point, I had all the design team work directly for me because I felt I had more control that way. And we actually paid them in advance for their work so that we could essentially have them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We had a lot of, we had 3 architectural firms we hired, 3 mechanical firms, plumbing, electrical firms. These are designers, 2 civil engineering firms, 2 testing firms, my own structural engineering firm we only had one of because obviously I wouldn't listen to anybody else. And we had meetings every morning at 6:30 at the site, and these are what some people would have considered prima donna architects and engineers, and in fact we made them come to the site. They stood in a dirty, we took over the heliport fire station as an office area starting like the 4th day, and they stood there in the dirt. There was no place to sit down. We had rot gut coffee and old donuts, and we had the contractors there, so there were probably 50 to 75 people in each meeting, and we essentially all talked together through every issue. What that did for the people is the contractors realized that not all design people were prima donnas, and the the architects and engineers realized that not all contractors were difficult people only out for the buck. We continued to bring more people on the job. We had things happen, like when I needed something, I would call, and there was one time when I remember I was told that we didn't have an account with these folks in Texas, so they wanted me to set up an account, and I asked them how much it was for what I wanted, and they told me, and I told them I'd deposit the money into their account in an hour. And the young man on the phone put me on hold. He got either his father or the man who owned the company on the phone, and he said, "I'll make sure I understand this. You're offering to give us money. You don't even know who we are." And I said, "Yes, this is what we're doing. This is what we need." And he said, "I'll take care of it." And he actually sent us the stuff. He chartered a plane. He never sent a bill. Wouldn't accept the money. That happened constantly at that job. Home Depot brought us truckloads after truckloads of whatever we needed. When I said we needed batteries, we got a tractor trailer full of batteries. It was just incredible. The Home Depot, the McDonald's, Burger Chef, Outback Steakhouse fed all the people constantly. We probably had 8,000 to 10,000 people there the first month or two. We had 3 sets of security, and what I found out there, where all of us found out, that people like the Salvation Army, the Red Cross, that none of us really pay much of attention to, were really pretty incredible. They even had people, like I found out later, were psychologists who there were 3 rings of security, and I was on the inner circle, as it were. And they would send people to the fence to get me to the fence and make sure I had water to drink and make sure I'd call my family. And it was clear, because all of us were so intense on what we were doing, we began to, I guess, think there was nothing else in the world other than what we were doing. And again, this was pretty much 20 hours a day, 7 days a week by that point, sometimes 3 and 4 days straight at a crack. Again, by December, people began buying into what we were doing, and it began to get publicized. And in fact, because of 4,250 people out there that were just incredibly hardworking people, it was done. In fact, the Marines, as you would expect, moved in a month earlier than the September 11th deadline that we promised for butts in chairs. We learned a lot from survivors who we spoke with and from the rescue people that we worked with in the beginning, so that the building that we put back is much more secure than it was before. It can take external and internal forces that are much stronger than, much higher than what they could have before. There's secure ways in and out of the building. We actually finished up, we did about 67% more work than originally was anticipated. We, with all of the contractors and architects and engineers, essentially finished the work and moved 2,000% more people into the space. That's 2,000%, which when you talk about small numbers, it's not a lot of people, but that isn't the point. We were given a $700 million budget, and we actually spent only $308 million. It was a 4 to 5 year fast-track job, and we did it in essentially 11 months, given that the first month we weren't able to do very much. The experience has left all of us incredibly proud, proud to be Americans, very sad. A lot of the survivors, a lot of the fatality spouses we've spoken with, and there's one lady who, a young girl from Utah, who would come to the site occasionally, and she would tell us how, while we were healing the scars of the Pentagon, we were helping survivors heal the scars that they had. She would come to these construction meetings, these real rough and tough guys. As you can tell, I'm a pretty straightforward person. And she would talk and thank them and talk about things. And within minutes, these guys all had their hands at their eyes. And clearly, if she would have talked much longer, they would have all been bawling. These people, these 4,238 people, did this for the people who perished. They did it for the honor of doing it themselves. They did it to show people who will do things like, or try to do things like this to the American people, our resolve and our fortitude and our heart. Through death, a poet once said, there's a celebration of life, and I think that's what we were all attempting to do. It became clear to me after, sometime in February, that if I dropped dead, which people were worried about, that these guys would have finished anyhow. And it became clear to me sometime in June that if the government said we're not paying anymore, everybody would have finished it anyhow. We had over 3 million person hours, to be politically correct, of work. We had 5 single-day work accidents, meaning somebody would break a finger or shoot a nail through their finger. We had 1 broken arm. We unfortunately had 2 heart attacks. One was an MP who we were very close with, who helped guard us and work with us. And the other was a construction mechanical contractor person who had a heart attack on the way into a meeting with me. That made us want even harder to finish what we started, because they died trying to do the same thing. We had one man who transferred to Washington. He was a sheet metal worker. His son was one of the people killed in the Pentagon, and he came to Washington to work in the Pentagon, which I'm sure was extremely difficult. Some of the things that we have seen come out of this is that the attitude that we have developed at the Phoenix Project, as we called it, is carrying over to other construction and design projects. Some of the jobs that I'm doing, some jobs that I'm not doing, but the attitude of some of the people that we work with is carrying over. We see that the people are setting the Phoenix Project up as a way that you can do things under any kind of circumstance. Even the services have asked to understand how we do things, how we can get things done under stress and pressure. It was an incredibly terrible thing to happen, but after you got past that, I think that the result at the Pentagon is an incredibly positive end result to a terribly negative beginning. It has made all of us incredibly proud to be Americans. We probably had, of the 4,200 people, there were probably 1,500 to 2,000 that didn't speak English. Security was incredibly high. I almost got arrested about 5 or 6 times by various agencies because I don't pay attention to orders. I began doing that so other people wouldn't get in trouble. I personally found that my parents were from Nazi Germany. We barely got out. They barely got out before I was born of Germany. My father was let loose of a concentration camp accidentally. And on the train on the way out, afterwards, when my mother tried to come out later, they started to drag her off a train. And a newspaper reporter and a soldier said, they've been through all the Hitler's Third Reich, and the worst they didn't want the worst thing that they saw to be them dragging a pregnant woman and a child, my sister, off the train to let them out. I feel that my parents, were they alive, would be pleased. I think I helped at least get the slate even between America and my family. Now the difficulty is that going from 20 hours a day, 7 days a week with no breaks, and you essentially all of us put our personal lives on hold. We had some wonderful family members that allowed us to do that and stood by us. It's very difficult to get back to a regular life. I know I used to watch football games on Sunday. I don't like doing that anymore. I restore antique cars for a living. I haven't been to a car show in a year and a half. I haven't touched my cars. Other people are having similar problems. But we, among all, believe that we have honored those who perished. We wish that we could honor more than we have the people from Pennsylvania who actually stood up before anybody else to do something. I personally wish the people here in Washington who labored doing this work were a little more recognized than they are. While we understand that New York was a terrible circumstance and lots of life was lost, that unfortunately is still a hole in the ground and is still a negative kind of thing, except for the people that work there. We believe that the Phoenix Project at the Pentagon was an incredible positive experience after the initial event, and we have formed relationships with each other for life that we hope we're carrying our experiences on to other people so they can find out how to do things. Some jackets we had made for all the people have some sayings that we believe in, that I've lived my life by, which is lead, follow, get the hell out of the way. Truman's, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And when the going gets tough, the tough get going. We believe the people here at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Lived that to the fullest, and appreciate the honor that the American people have given us all to accomplish what we were able to accomplish. Thank you.